Hailing frequencies open, and welcome to Enterprising Individuals, the Star Trek discussion podcast that boldly goes into excruciating detail about the series, characters, and stories of the Star Trek universe. I'm your host, Aaron Coker, aka Caliban, and I'm no good at being noble, but it doesn't take much to see that the problems of three little aliens don't amount to a hill of sand peas in this crazy quadrant. I'm joined on this episode once again by Gooey Fame. Gooey is a musician and a podcaster, the co-host of the Virtual Theater podcast, and my co-host on the BackTrekking podcast. Gooey, welcome back to the show.
Hey, thanks. It's always fun to be here.
It is great to have you back,
Yeah.
and today we'll be talking about Profit and Loss, the 18th episode of the second season of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. When William Faulkner accepted his Nobel Prize for Literature in 1950, he said that the human heart in conflict with itself is the only thing worth writing about. He wasn't a sci-fi author, but if he was, I'm sure that he would include aliens as humans when it comes to storytelling. But what happens when your humans and aliens live in a utopia that's free from want and, ostensibly, conflict? Enter Deep Space Nine, an outpost on the outskirts of a war-torn region where refugees and representatives of various sovereignties struggle to survive in the shadow of looming danger. DS9 moved the focus of the franchise from the hollowed halls of Starfleet to the uncertain existence of the galaxy's fringe, where morality was conditional and convictions could get you killed. Removing the security and moral certainty of the Federation meant that the writers of DS9 were free to explore a world of spies, opportunists, and ideologues in conflict with each other and with themselves. But we'll talk about that a little later in the show. First, Gooey, it's great to have you back on the program.
Yeah.
And what's new with you?
Oh, what is new? No, still a lot of weirdness right now in the world, but I am playing some of my bands are playing some shows in the next few weeks and months for the first time. Yeah.
Sure.
And so that'll be interesting to see how it goes. Because I know some people have gotten back out there, but there's been a lot of what's going on in the world, but So it's been interesting. I just was practicing some of my band songs for the first time, and like it was interesting being like, okay, normally I'll be like, okay, it's just like riding a bike, but now it's been like over a year since I played some of the songs. I was like, wait a minute, oh no, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I'm going to brush up a little bit. Yeah, there's, of course, it's fall is on its way, and so a lot of state fairs are opening, and a lot of them have a lot of different ideas about what's safe. And I know that my local state fair, which is one of the biggest state fairs in the country, did not require masks or even vaccinations, and they're just saying, we encourage you to do the right thing.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, all right, well, I think the right thing would probably be for, you as an entity to ask people to, meet the most basic level of safety that we've agreed on in society. But there's things like that. There's things like, I hear concert announcements and I see them online, and people are getting ready to just get back out there because that's what we're going to do.
Yeah, there's one festival that both my bands are playing that just announced like they were requiring proof of vaccination, or like I think a negative test within 48 hours or something like that.
Right.
And it was interesting when they posted it. They posted all these different like little infographics or what, like information, with the festival graphics and everything. And then one of the slides they posted was, I guess they like pulled the people coming or something, and they said like, would you be able to show proof of vaccination if we required it? And like over 90% of people said yeah. So it's funny, they posted that almost being like, you can't get mad at us. Most people can do it. It's not a problem.
It's easy. Yeah. It is really easy to do, and it's easy to get, and people should definitely do that. And, speaking of graphs, like I've seen a lot of kind of worrying graphs recently, especially graphs about the increase of infections in school-age children, most of whom are not cleared to get the vaccine.
Right.
They have no recourse other than to wear a mask or PPE or social distance. And so people's resistance to this is still baffling to me. It's gone beyond just hiding the zombie bite, and now it's like, parading the zombie bite around.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, follow me. I've been bitten. We'll all be together very soon.
Yeah, and that thing about the kids is an interesting point too, because I was talking to a friend, a few weeks ago, and I was like, I'm not sure what's going to happen with this festival because, it's in Florida and things are bad there and all this stuff. Yeah. And he said, like, well, at this point, everyone, it's your choice now to get COVID, basically. And I'm like, well, I don't know. There's like kids and, there's like people who can't get the vaccine yet, So, yeah. Like, I don't want to say, like, we got the vaccine, like, let's just get out there. But anyway, I think, things like the festival being, like, making you get vaccinated to come is, like, a good thing. But, while acknowledging there's, like, people who can't. Now, there's a lot of people who can, though, and they should.
Yeah, it might be your choice to get it, but it's not your choice who you give it to. And you don't know, who gets it from you, who they'll give it to. And I mean, I can't believe we have to explain this to people. And also, there are a lot of things in our society that you can choose to do, but we still restrict you from doing it because it's harmful and it's harmful to society as a whole. So yeah, I don't know. Just people just got to do the right thing.
Yeah. So, I've been rocking out though in my private time. So hopefully it can bring that to the public.
Well, we're talking about public gatherings and meetings before, and I'm looking forward to attending the Mission Chicago Star Trek convention this April if the world cooperates with our plans.
Yeah, me too. I'm pretty excited. I got some friends who are even gonna come to town from that, who are coming all the way from like Maine. So,
oh really?
Yeah. Wow. I got some buddies that me and my girlfriend will watch Star Trek with them, like over Discord or whatever, and we'll watch mostly movies. We'll have like Trek movie night, and it was funny. Like I told them about that, and they're like, "All right, we're coming," and they like got tickets and everything. I'm like, "Whoa!" I was like, "I haven't even got that stuff yet."
Yeah, well, I mean, if everything goes according to plan. And hopefully it will. We'll be representing, enterprising individuals and BackTrekking there at the show. And, just all this COVID worry, I'm hoping that future listeners will look back at how foolish we were to be worried about the safety and good nature of humanity. Hoping.
Oh, yeah.
And then for in the alternate universe, in the post-apocalyptic people, we told you. But anyway.
I think I've said this before on one of our shows, but I'm not acting like I know anything anymore. Because if you asked me about something in like April of 2020 about what I thought COVID would be like in 8 months, I'd probably sound stupid. So I'm just like hoping for the best.
It's hard to know what the future is going to be, but, we do have examples of the past of how things like this have played out. And if you look at, I read a couple articles a while ago about the 1918 pandemic, and it's like, this is pretty much exactly like what happened. In terms of like the waves and in terms of like anti-vax groups and then prominent people on the anti-vax side going, screw that. And then like, dong, RIP, so-and-so didn't get the vaccine. Oh,
it's happening so much. Yeah.
So yeah, we're just basically repeating history, but that's supposedly something that we need to do every once in a while.
Right. Keep us humble.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we don't want to think that we've got it too good. On your podcast, Virtual Theater, you talk about video game films and the stories that inspired them. And recently on the show, I talked with a guest all about Star Trek video games. And there are a lot of Star Trek video games, actually, but not really any good ones. Like, I think we both agreed that there's nothing that you would put like in the top 50 or maybe even top 100 of games. Why do you think it's so tough to make a Star Trek game?
It's probably just due to the like, if you're like Star Wars game, it's like, it's just there's so much action to draw on, and when you're playing, I mean, there are plenty of puzzle based and like more out of the box thoughtful video games, but like, usually when you play a game, you just want something that like at first you want it to feel good over it, like making you think good, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Like,
sure.
I'm more concerned with like, how does it feel to jump or shoot a gun or something,
Okay. Yeah.
And so that's I think, and that's a lot of people's focus, And so
Star Trek people sometimes jump and shoot, but that is a lot of
that's
of
only
Star Trek.
That's
Star
only
Wars.
A facet of it, more so. It's like, so I think that's probably the biggest issue. But there are so many creative people that come up with all these super thoughtful games where the mechanics are like some real brain busting stuff, or like just really interesting stories or something like that. But I'm probably just guessing, like those are usually labors of love and stuff like that. And I don't know, it's how are you going to lock them down to make your IP game? And I'm sure they're like, we want to make something that we can mass market, not a niche little indie Star Trek game,
Yeah, I think it's pretty easy to since Star Wars is, kind of action based, to just make any concept or gameplay idea Star Wars by adding force powers or a lightsaber or something like that. And so you can just take something that would be an action game and now it's a Star Wars game. I think like Battlefront is a great example of that. A game that was very successful in a military theme, and now it's like, well, we'll just put stormtroopers in there and you got a game. But like Star Trek is like, it's more esoteric, because what are you trying to do? You want spaceships, you probably want phasers and things like that, but is it a story-based game, or is it a puzzle game, or is it just like action, like Starship Combat? And so you have to sort of, follow the prevailing trends as far as that goes. I mean, I would play if they made like a Star Trek Battlefront game. I would definitely give it a shot.
That would be sweet, though, too.
Yeah. Klingon soldiers versus, Federation security officers. And then you can have the, you collected all the tokens. You can be Kirk now. And he comes in with a phaser rifle and shoots everybody.
Right.
But I think a lot of people would argue that that's not necessarily like what Star Trek should be about.
That does, though, get to like the core of your question. It's because it's like they have made those types of Star Trek games, but why haven't those ever succeeded in being good? Like there is that Star Trek, the one that's like the sequel to
2013. Yeah, the 2013 game.
Right, yeah, that one. And that's like an action-based cover shooter, but you watch, I don't know, I watch gameplay of that and it looks just like generic low effort garbage, like
Gears of Trek.
Gears of Trek, yeah. Why can't we get like, I don't know, something that's like that Fallen Order game or whatever, that Jedi game that people seem to like?
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. Where's our Star Trek Metroidvania game?
Yeah, there's a game from the year 2000 called DS9 The Fallen, which I wish that they would. I guess at this point, since it's a license, I think the fact that it's such a big license is the problem, because it's, Paramount or Viacom CBS is just going to get the lowest bidder to make their licensed game. And it's unlikely that, Naughty Dog or some big studio would want to take on somebody else's IP. But it's also the problem that we're not going to get a good old games version of The Fallen, because nobody's going to want to restore this thing and make it run well on modern PCs. But what's cool about it is it's set in DS9, and you have a choice between playing, different characters, Cisco, Kira, Worf. And it's a third-person action, but it also has the I would compare it kind of to like Arkham Asylum a little bit, in that there is, and you're using like the tricorder to do like detective mode type stuff, and it's got kind of role-playing elements. And it's just like a really neat game, but it was made 20 years ago, and like nobody's picked up that torch yet. In
general, like they dropped the ball. They're gonna make it a lot of cool Deep Space Nine stuff. Why didn't we get that?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. We got a ton of, in the 90s and like early 2000s, we got a ton of Starship Combat games. And
there is that sort of board game. Or it's not board game, but it's like the ship battle tabletop game. That looks cool.
There's a couple of those. And a lot of those FMV games, where like Q is like telling you to do something, which are basically just like choose your own adventure games. But yeah.
I always thought, like, I guess that is close to how you could do an okay Trek game. Like, I always thought, like, Telltale could get the license and do one of their, Walking Dead style, games where you get some choices, and sure, it's not, like, that open, because they kind of have to, there's only so many outcomes they can account for. But, tell, like, a Star Trek story that's, like, semi-interactive, and you get like maybe a cool stylized art style or something. I don't know. That could be okay. It wouldn't be like the best thing you could do, but it would be all right.
Yeah. What do you think about the current state of video game cinema?
Video games, well, what was the last big thing was like Sonic. I think we're getting to a point where, because what I've kind of come to learn from watching my show is like I actually like a lot of the stuff that is considered bad, and I think it's like a lot of fun. Sometimes goofy and sometimes definitely bad. But there's like plenty of interesting movies in there that are a lot of fun, and I think what we're gonna see is sort of how it reminds me sort of like the MCU, where there actually were plenty of solid comic book movies before the Avengers, but then I think it became like a lot of people were like, yeah, comic book movies are good now. And I think that's what we're gonna get, because I feel like Sonic wasn't actually, it was like an okay solid like kids movie, but it really wasn't like that amazing of a movie. It really had not much to do with Sonic the Hedgehog the game or anything, I really thought. But somehow everyone was like that, and like Detective Pikachu, people were like, all right, they finally broke the curse of bad video game movies. And I was like, I don't know.
Also, I like Pokemon, so my opinion can be trusted.
At this point, I think maybe I just watched so many. I'm like, I would probably rather watch like, I don't know, the Silent Hill movie or something over those.
Yeah. Obviously, video games have plots and characters and all the same things that movies do, but usually it's a question of trying to turn the narrative, or turn the game into a narrative. So I guess in Pac-Man, the ghosts have feelings, and the pretzels do this or something. But something else that I think we're seeing now with people's facility and familiarity with video games in society is movies about games, like something like Free Guy, which you kind of have to like get how like an MMO works, or an action game works to get what Free Guy is kind of selling you.
True. Or you could like not get it and try to make that movie. Like what was that was it Serenity, the Matthew McConaughey movie, where it's like, I don't think this person has seen a video game before, but they made a video game movie.
Right. They have an idea of like, a video game. Right. Yeah.
It's like a virtual world. It's
right.
Like the
that's
Matrix.
What happens. And the characters in it are like, how do we get out of this virtual world? Yeah.
Yeah.
There was a movie from a while ago, I think it was a Disney movie starring Dabney Coleman called Cloak and Dagger. And it's about this kid who's like obsessed with video games, but also with role-playing games. And he envisions, his father is kind of absent, but he envisions his character, his player character, as a version of his father who's like this super spy. And so half the movie is like these goofy scenarios, like these spy scenarios that he imagines this character in, but then he himself gets embroiled in a real life spy drama in his real life. And so at like critical moments, like he's imagining what his father character would do, and and he rolls the dice and that sort of thing. And I thought that was really, that movie kind of like just sort of passed, and I don't think anybody really remembers it, but I thought it was an interesting blend of how would you take something like a tabletop role-playing game and sort of dramatize, what you're doing or what happens. Like sometimes like he rolls bad and the character's going to die, but he's like, no, that's not where, I'm not going to take that role. We're going to do something else. And so like the movie kind of rewinds. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. I've never heard of that. That sounds interesting though.
Yeah, I love Dabney Coleman movies. As listeners may or may not know, you and I co-host another Star Trek podcast called BackTrekking, where we examine the real-world inspirations behind classic Trek episodes. And those inspirations could be actual historical events, literature and short stories, even television and film, like in the case of our episode today. And we also take Trek episodes and compare them to pieces of media that share an inspiration or that explore similar themes. And we'll talk in a minute about Profit and Loss and its own inspiration. But first, I want to ask, how surprised are you now, over 2 years into the life of the show, that we're still finding material to talk about in the podcast?
I'm not surprised, actually, only because like one of the things that first drew me to Star Trek was that it was like oh, this week we're doing like a Wild West episode, and this week we're like doing, it's like a Twilight Zone. There's a lot of Twilight Zones, or this week it's a battle episode. And so I've always, like, one of the top 3 things that I associate with something I love about Star Trek is kind of its versatility and like being this one universe, but gives you like so many genres within. So yeah, like it should be surprising, but I'm not, because I love, that's something I love about Trek.
Yeah. It's funny that, like, for Trek, which is an ongoing franchise with now over 800 episodes, they're always going to need content. Like, it's possible, I suppose, but it would be very tough to tell 800 stories on Kirk's Enterprise. Do you know what I mean? I mean, I haven't counted the extended universe books. Maybe it's already been done, but you have to repeat yourself at some point. But it is fascinating that Trek, not only presents interesting situations and characters and worlds, but also serves as a backdrop for so many things that you can drop other plots and things into, as we've seen, as we've explored movies and novels and TV shows that have been transplanted into Trek.
And that's also why, too, we, at the same time, we also have hit points where, I'm pretty sure, like, they've done this sort of plot, like, 2 or 3 other times.
Oh, Trek repeats itself. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
There are only so many ideas, I guess, out there at the same time. But
yeah,
I mean, and even with what we're talking about today, we already covered it. So
yeah, we did. It's without actually, going deep into our backlog and examining things. I would say that often, I don't know if it's just a case of Trek getting it right the first time, but like when Trek revisits a plot, it often isn't as good as the first time. And maybe it's because they just squeezed all the juice out of it the first time. I think sometimes it's because Trek is aware that it's already visited this idea or this theme and needs to do something new and did get it right the first time. And so they're kind of stuck saying, well, should we have it go wrong this time? Or is there some other aspect of this theme or a result that we can examine? And it finds itself kind of spinning its wheels.
I totally get that sometimes. Like that thought crossed my head recently when we watched on our show the Thaw in Voyager, and it wasn't exactly the same, but it's sort of the conflict in that they had with the clown sort of reminded me of Moriarty in TNG, and I was thinking, like, a classic Star Trek ending to this would be like they figure out a weird way to like trap the clown guy and like let him keep living his life so they don't kill a guy. And I don't know if this is what they thought, but then it's like kind of a twist in the end where it's like, no, they just kill him.
Screw that guy. Yeah.
Which would be like
down, Lenny. You'll never see Squiggy again.
Originally, like, the cool thing about TNG is that it's like they found a way to subvert like just defeating the enemy, But then now it's like a re-subversion because it's like you would expect this from Star Trek. So like we twisted it back,
Yeah, no, screw that guy. Yeah, he's dead.
So that, I don't know if that's what they thought, but it does feel like, no, we can't do that again,
Yeah. Well, it's we're almost 60 episodes into the show, and it was created on something of a whim, but I knew it was a solid idea. And I think it's held up. And so I was just looking back at our catalog and some of what I think are some of the best episodes that we did and some of the most poignant comparisons that we made. I was surprised. Again, another pitch that was kind of a whim, but we were like, isn't Flatliners, the movie Flatliners, a lot like the Voyager episode, The Barge of the Dead? And the answer was, it kind of was.
Yeah, that was sweet too. I like... That goes back to what I was saying about Star Trek, where like sometimes it's just like, let's just do a Flatliners, let's do a Die Hard, it is our like big thinky, sci-fi show, but sometimes we just do like this, kick-ass, kind of action movie. Like,
you can throw that in.
Yeah, why not?
Kill me so I can deal with my issues with my parent.
Yeah.
Like, all right, that works in Star Trek, sure.
Yeah.
Something else that we talked about recently because of the release of Wonder Woman 1984 was we took the opportunity to compare it to DS9's Rivals, which I don't think Wonder Woman 1984 doesn't spring specifically from Rivals, but both of them deal with a very, very old idea, which is the idea of the monkey's paw, or being careful what you wish for.
Yeah, that one, that's one of those ones where it's like you throw it out and it's like, this is kind of goofy, but let's do it. And it's like, okay, the connections are tenuous at best, but you kind of get to explore a theme anyway, which is always something that's kind of fun. Is when, I don't know, I like variety again with the types of stuff in Star Trek. So even in my own time when I'm preparing for this, I like, all right, cool, I get to watch well, not that I wasn't that excited about watching Wonder Woman, but it was exciting to watch for a Star Trek podcast, just this like totally, kind of out there, not important or talked about episode,
Yeah, or doing 50 First Dates in Twilight.
Yeah, another
from Enterprise.
Well, no, that was perfect actually. That was pretty good.
Yeah, if only the Twilight planet Ceti Alpha 5 had been more like Hawaii, like if there was walruses to hang out with.
Like a nice vacation for everyone, yeah.
Yeah.
If only Rob Schneider was there.
The parallels would be real specific. Yeah, how come Rob Schneider never did a Star Trek?
He would be a perfect weird alien guy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they're making they're making 3 of these shows basically in the 90s, right? Like, where was Rob Schneider at that time?
I don't know. Movies. They got Michael McKean.
Yeah, he wasn't a TV guy at that point.
Yeah.
And then some of the inspirations are more explicit, like the time that we talked about the TOS episode Arena and its actual inspiration, which was the short story Arena by Frederick Brown, who also wrote the episode.
Oh, yeah. That one just rocked. That was cool.
Yeah. It's an example of a classic, 50s, or I can't remember the exact date, but 40s, 50s pulp sci-fi story of the like that inspired many of the early TOS episodes.
Yeah, we've done a cool like a few sci-fi stories like from that era. Like we did those Asimov ones, right? And we did the Flat Cats, and I always kind of like visiting that era, which is, I guess, if it's a little bit before the Trek time, but it feels like it's kind of like the heritage almost of Star Trek, because it's like just that era almost, or like what preceded it, or like when we watched was it Forbidden Planet or whatever. It's like this is just like a step to Star Trek, so it's kind of cool to see like the cultural beginnings almost of that sort of speculative sci-fi thing.
People talk about the positivity of Trek, especially early Trek, and it's a positive. It was really Roddenberry that made it a positivity of utopia, a future that we could get excited about because racial divisions were gone and economic problems were a thing of the past. And if you read those old 40s and 50s pulp stories, there's no suggestion. Everybody's white. There's no suggestion that like racial integration is a thing, and everybody gets a paycheck. It's not like they're free from like economic problems, but there is that sort of classic optimism about the future. It's like, hey, we're in space. How bad could it be? Man will achieve these heights. Man will develop these technologies, and we'll be out there. And sure, we'll run into a blobby alien, and maybe we have to kill them. But things are going pretty good.
Yeah. That I think that's what sets you can take something like Forbidden Planet, and then you mix in some of the like utopia stuff into it, and it gives you like similar but different kind of characters and settings. But yeah, it's like that's what sets it apart and makes it a little bit more, I don't know, fun, I guess, and unique from those things.
Yeah. And even in like Forbidden Planet, there's the warning of delving too greedily and too deep. The idea that science and technology is cool, but maybe not too much science and technology, like a Black Mirror type message where they get in trouble because they're dealing with powers they can't possibly understand. And that isn't often a theme in Trek. Knowledge is almost always good in Trek. Very rarely do they run into like a technology that's like, oh, this is too much technology. We can't have this.
Yeah, I can think of a few where it's like, oh, the technology became their like god, and they,
oh sure,
or like, oh, they forgot how to like do anything.
Yeah,
but never
but
like it'll
there's
drive
never,
you mad.
Yeah, there's never a Wall-E situation where it's like, hey, go out and plant some tomatoes. Why are you just drinking a Slurpee all day? You know, it's the luxury of Trek is always seen as positive, and our characters can read a book and get a chamomile tea or whatever whenever they want, but yet they still get up and do things, and the convenience never corrupts them.
I wonder if there's like, maybe that just goes, well, Star Trek at this point has become whatever you want it to be. You could kind of tell whatever, but I wonder if there's room for like a story like that in maybe even if it's not a series thing. I guess in Discovery they had that weird like cloud thing or whatever. I forgot what the sphere was. It
right?
Wasn't that some like AI? And I guess they are exploring like AI gone too far. And Picard
that's a great point. Yeah, in 2 of the new series, they're like, well, this clearly is too much. And it's weird that not weird, it's very interesting that they picked AI as the thing that we have to watch out for. Partially because I think that has been the central premise of a couple shows and movies that took place in the interim between, Enterprise and Discovery. But also because Trek has never really addressed AI all that much. We've got Data and we've got all the robots that Kirk talks to death, but in their advanced universe, why is there no AI? Why are there no real sentient programs? And when there are, somebody like Data or the Doctor, they're very isolated cases.
It's something I guess I wish I would see maybe a more, like, I feel like there could be a more interesting take on it, because like a show like Deep Space Nine or something kind of showed like that we can have like all this technology, it can be positive, but it's really about like who wields it and how that could be dangerous, and not the tech in itself. And maybe that was kind of the point of Picard too, because it's not like every android is bad or anything, but it did kind of, I feel like, I mean, maybe that's kind of the point, but it kind of played into like robots are kind of scary, huh?
Yeah. And making explicit too the fact that once you have all that technology and advantage, like what you do with it and how you treat other races that don't have it is what defines you. We always forget that the Klingon Empire is called the Klingon Empire, which would suggest that they lord over other species that they have conquered. And by the time they get to TNG and the Berman years, the scope of Trek has expanded to the point where we could explore that, but the Klingons are kind of the good guys now, and so we can't really do that. And that's why we get the Cardassians, and we see how an advanced race like the Cardassians has victimized and exploited a race like the Bajorans, who are not at their level.
Yeah, and it's something that I've thought about recently, actually, is how like, so they have like in like TNG, Deep Space Nine era or whatever, they have all this technology that wasn't as prevalent or maybe didn't exist when they made the show, but now it's pretty widespread, like stuff like just like the communicators and like being able to tell where anyone is, and like video and tablets and all this stuff that like now is like, there's a lot of security issues and surveillance issues that people are nervous about, but like they're already showing us a world where they have all that, but it's not a big deal, and no one seems to be like being monitored or whatever. So that to me now says, now that we do have it, that if it's still a future from now, which maybe it isn't, but in this, if they're imagining it as such, like there had to be a time where we get from here to then and go like, okay, we have to like actually put limits on how we use this technology, like we can tell you where you are on the ship, but like you can't just like, listen in on their communicator or, their pad or their computer or whatever,
Yeah. Maybe they'll do that in season 4 of Discovery,
or like a Section 31 probably does that stuff.
Yeah, there'll be a Cambridge Analytica type scandal where everybody's they've got everybody's information and people don't like it.
That would be great if there was like a Trek.
We gave you your little hollow badges, and you clicked through the agreement, you signed it.
Right? Yeah. Oh man.
Well, if you like talk like this is all BackTrekking is. So check out BackTrekking at BackTrekking.com. if you want more of that. It should be apparent to anybody, I think, who watches today's episode, Profit and Loss, that is based, at least in structure, on the 1942 film Casablanca. And I'll just say, it's like 80 years old at this point. It's one of the most famous movies of all time. But if you haven't seen Casablanca, do that. Just stop this. Go watch it.
Oh, yeah.
And the episode, DS9 episode, I guess, and then come back. And the parallels in the episode are, I think, clear. But the connection in the original script was even more explicit. In fact, the original script for the episode was titled, Here's Looking at You. But of course, that was changed because who needs a Warner Brothers lawyer breathing down their neck?
Oh, what if they called it Ears Looking at You?
See, that if they had the guts to do that
would have been so good.
I feel like the Warner Brothers lawyer would just be like, you're all right. You just leave.
I've come Casablanca. I know it's not old enough, but it should be public domain. I feel
yeah. I feel like the way that that copyright, and IP protection in general has gone, especially in the cinematic sphere, it'll never be in the public domain. But that's a conversation perhaps for a different show.
Yeah.
On this show, we're talking about the DS9 episode Profit and Loss. It's the 18th episode of the second season of DS9. It first aired on March 20th, 1994. It was written by Flip Kobler and Cindy Marcus. And Kobler and Marcus are a husband and wife writing team. This is their only Trek credit, but they would go on to write several sequels to Disney animated films like The Lion King 2, Simba's Pride, Pocahontas 2, Journey to a New World, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame 2, The Secret of the Bell. They also were reportedly working on an animated Pirates of the Caribbean feature until they came up with the idea for the live action thing, and so that was scrapped.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the pair also founded the Showdown Stage Company at the Hub Theater in North Hollywood, where they produced teen-themed plays based on classic works of literature. So if you're they didn't do Aladdin 2, they can't be blamed for that. But if you're the kind of person who just hackles go up every time you see Lion King 2 or something like that, or Lilo and Stitch 2 or whatever, they were at the forefront of that.
I had some of those and big foam squishy cases. Those were good.
Yeah. The episode was directed by Robert Weimer, who we've talked about on the show previously. Weimer directed 8 episodes of TNG before Profit and Loss, and he passed away in 2014. There is no start date for this episode, not uncommon for a DS9 episode. And your assignment, Gooey, if you can, is to give us a 25-word synopsis of Profit and Loss.
Oh, I forgot about this aspect. First I'll do a short one, which is Quark does a Casablanca.
Okay, yeah, sure.
But, okay. Quark reunites with a former love who is a Cardassian rebellion leader person. And that's probably good enough. And conflicts ensue.
And conflicts ensue,
yeah.
as they must. Conflict with the human heart. Here's some interesting facts from the memory banks about the episode. We learn a lot about Garak in this episode compared to what we knew before. We learn that he's a Cardassian exile, and he confesses to Bashir, although facetiously, that he is an outcast spy. And he had only appeared in 2 episodes before this. This is the 3rd episode total that we get of Garak. During the love scene between Quark and Natima, the actor's makeup had to be touched up after each take because Armin Shimmerman's orange makeup and the guest star's gray makeup would end up mixing together. So they're trading makeup in that scene. This episode was being filmed when the 1994 Northridge earthquake, which was a 6.7 on the Richter scale, hit Los Angeles. The quake happened at 4:31 a.m. when many of the alien actors were having their makeup applied. And some of the actors, including Armin Shimmerman and Ed Wiley, who plays Turan, couldn't get through to their families on the phone, so they got in their cars to drive home, and they had to do it in full makeup. And I've heard before Armin Shimmerman tell a story about how he was driving home in his makeup and he was stopped at an intersection at a red light getting ready to turn left. And the motorist across the intersection saw him in his car with his Ferengi ears and his teeth. And when the light turned green, they were like, no, that's okay. Go ahead. You go. Just let him go.
I would honestly, I would be scared. I'm pretty afraid of monsters.
It's 5 a.m., it's dark out, and then, the headlights reveal a monster in the car. After, no less, everybody has been shaken literally by this earthquake. It's like, where are these monsters coming from?
Oh, I'd be like, yeah, I guess it's, especially now, I'd be like, yeah, it's the end of the world. That's fine.
After 10,000 years, I'm free. Yeah. After
like, I don't have to go to work today, is what I would think.
Right. Yeah. Just get a snap of this and just show that to my boss. After a 2-day inspection of the studio, filming resumed on January 19th. As far as the episode itself goes, series writer and producer Ira Stephen Bear is not a fan of this episode. He's said in the past that he feels that Quark comes off as too heroic in the episode, and the show already had too many heroes, and he wanted more offbeat, interesting characters. He said specifically, quote, "You don't take Woody Allen and make him into a Bogart." And series creator and producer Michael Piller also said that this was a, quote, disappointing episode in the season.
Oh, really? I don't agree that it's not good, because I feel like it's really well put together and everything, and every character has such a good, thrust through the story, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And maybe it is because they took, kind of a pre-existing idea and molded it into this. But I mean, I just feel like I was watching this, I'm like, yeah, they know how to put, like, it seems that they really know what they're doing, and like it really feels like, yeah, we know how to move these characters around through this story. Like, I don't know, it just felt like they really knew what they were doing.
Yeah, it's weird because, we're talking, or we have been talking, and we'll continue to talk about how Trek can push the boundaries of characterization and can adapt other ideas, and especially on DS9, let its characters grow beyond the whole, we are Starfleet kind of mold. And here you've got two of the architects of not only this series, but a lot of 90s Trek sort of reacting negatively against seeing characters outside of the archetypes or stereotypes that they had originally cast them in. Seeing Quark be something of a romantic hero or lead, which is funny because you and I and Heel Mary talked about Necessary Evil on Enterprising Individuals previously, and Quark is a romantic lead in that one. Like, you've got a situation where there's this woman from his past, and they're kind of flirtatious, and it's not the thrust of the episode, but we're already seeing that Quark could be this romantic figure. And here we spotlight that in this episode, and they're like, no, that doesn't work. He's just a goofy guy that runs the bar.
No, it's not true, because and then they also give him, the House of Quark, and like the follow-up episode to that. Like, he is totally a guy who has romances, which I don't see why that makes perfect sense, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a social butterfly. He runs a bar, Yeah.
Yeah. Let Quark go on a date or two. Come on.
I do think it is interesting to think, like, does it make him less bad? Because I feel like early on they have some episodes where he causes some like awful things to happen. And it's like, and at the end of the episode, even if they try to soften it, it's like, oh, he feels kind of irredeemable. But then later in the series, it happens kind of to every character, because you just grow to like all the characters almost. But like, by the end with him and like Odo or whatever, and they become, I feel like they always grow closer, I feel like. And I'm kind of in the middle of a rewatch, and I'm in like season 5, and there was something that happened in one episode between them where I'm like, well, now Quark can never like be bad. He's just too lovable, so maybe they have gotten to that point, but it goes back and forth. So
it's like sentiment creep or something like that, where they've just been through too much at this point. Like, how many times and I'm not saying that DS9 did it too many times or failed at all, but like, how many times can Quark and Odo see eye to eye before Odo just stops being such a prick to him,
Yeah. It made me think, like, it is kind of interesting in some of the earlier stuff where he just does some awful things in it. And
he's pretty bad early on. Yeah.
And it's kind of cool, because it's like, I kind of like that there is like someone so like evil or like awful or slimy that like they're forced to like interact with on a Star Trek show,
Yeah.
and
deal
with them. Yeah.
Let's talk about the guest stars in the episode. Mary Crosby appears as Natima Lang. Crosby is the daughter of Bing Crosby and his second wife, Catherine Crosby. That makes her Denise Crosby's aunt. And she began acting at the age of 4, and she would go on to many appearances in TV series in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. She also played the female lead of Ice Pirates, Princess Karina. If you're not familiar with Ice Pirates, go check it out. And she is probably most famous for the role of Kristen Shepard on Dallas, which she played for 2 seasons.
Oh.
She shot JR.
Oh, really? I actually
so now
never
you know the answer.
I never knew. I was just like, that's a big question.
Yeah.
Maybe one day I'll know.
Tasha Yar's aunt shot JR.
Whoa.
That's how you know. Michael Riley Burke plays Hogue in the episode. Burke had appeared previously on TNG as the Borg Goval in Descent Part 2, and he would go on to play Koss, T'Pol's fiancé, in 3 episodes of Enterprise. Burke has had a prolific career in television since his debut on TNG, having amassed over 100 credits, including playing the title role in the 2002 film Ted Bundy. Heidi Sweetberg appears as Rekindle. Sweetberg has had a similarly prolific career in movies and television, appearing in films such as In Country, Welcome Home, Roxy Carmichael, and Galaxy Quest, but she is definitely known best for the role of Susan Ross, the fiancée of George Costanza, which she played for 4 years on Seinfeld.
Nice. Okay. Cool.
And it's like Quark, you know? George gets women, Quark gets women. You don't think of George as being a guy, but he has a fiance for 4 years. Also, he dates a ton of women on the show, and Quark could be in the same situation.
Yeah, let's let the weird little bald guys get some.
Yeah, for sure. That's our quote for this episode. Edward Wiley appears as Turan. Wiley has appeared previously in Trek as the Klingon governor Vach in the 4th season episode of TNG, The Mind's Eye. Wiley made his screen acting debut in the 1981 film Chariots of Fire. He's also appeared in the films Highlander, Sniper, and SFW before retiring from acting in 1996. Oh. It's always interesting to see, like, when I go through people's IMDb's, you know, you look at an actor like Rod Steiger, for instance, who's been in like almost 200 films. Everybody has worked with this guy. He's a Hollywood legend. And then you look at like so-and-so who's been on like a bunch of TV shows, and they've got like 250 credits, you know, because it's just like you get to a position, and you see it a lot with Star Trek guest stars where they're just on call. Like either the studio, you know, or their agent has got them out there. And so they're just every week they're showing up on something, and it's got to be a pretty good living for somebody. You're never going to be the Tom Cruise, but you're getting a lot of money just doing other stuff.
I love some of these people too. Not even like the big name ones. I love some of these people because I'll be watching like Voyager or Enterprise or something, and they're on there, and I'm like, I don't know who this is, but I know they're from, I've seen them in TNG or something. Yeah. And you know, even if I don't bother to look it up, it's like, this feels more like Star Trek because they're here. Yeah. There's something like comforting about seeing a face you kind of remember from Star Trek in another Star Trek.
Well, let's talk about the episode itself. And something that we discuss often on BackTrekking is the way in which an idea or a plot evolves when you bring it into Trek. And although I think something like Casablanca is tailor-made, Garak pun intended, to be in the world of DS9, it's interesting how the individual players in the story all find new motivations and positions in comparison to Casablanca. And as I watch the film and then watch the episode, you have to sit there and go, well, okay, all right, who's the Rick here? Who's the Louis? Who's the Ilsa? You have to kind of like look at it that way. And I think the characters map pretty well on the principles from Casablanca, but their motivations are all tailor-made to the characters that we know. And it very interestingly like changes the reason why the characters are kind of doing what they do.
You have to. Movie. Yeah, you definitely have to, because you can't have Quark have the same backstory as Rick, but maybe you throw
they try, because they talk about how, and of course Quark is all about profit, but they talk about how he sold food to like the Bajoran refugees, which I'm sure he wasn't supposed to do during the occupation. And so, you know, I don't think that necessarily betrays like altruism on his part, but in the film Casablanca, you know, Rick always tries to to color his revolutionary activities as being mercenary. People always bring up that, like, oh, you ran guns to Ethiopia and you fought, against Franco in Spain or whatever. And he's always like, well, it doesn't pay quite as well, but it was all about the money.
Yeah, I feel like in that, maybe it's just my takeaway from it, but it feels like, okay, he's fronting there, obviously. And then they show the flashbacks and it's like, yeah, he's like a romantic guy and he has feelings, Whereas like Quark, maybe it's just like you've seen enough of him, but it's like, it's very easy for me to be like, oh yeah, he did that because he would make money,
Yeah. Yeah, like ultimately, like Rick is... I think both Rick and Quark and both Casablanca and this episode all have the same theme, which is that you have to be what you are and you won't be happy if you're not. And in Casablanca, Rick is he's playing the role of a cynic and a drunkard because he has been disappointed and frustrated by, what happened with his relationship with Ilsa and, the fall of France and the Nazis moving over Europe. And so he's trying to be this like miserable bar owner, and he can't be that ultimately. And that, he does what he does at the end of the movie because of his innate heroism, whereas Quark is our hero on the show, but he is no hero himself, and he is in love with this woman, certainly, but the relationship breaks up originally because he was being Quark, because because he was like skimming off the top or whatever. Natima says like, you were like doing Ferengi stuff and you were like, trying to make money off of this situation. And, by the end, even as he's like loading her and her students onto the ship, like he's still like, well, you could just stay here. I mean, like they're the important ones, right?
All the way up until the end. Where Rick is,
stay with me.
Rick is like, I am ready to fight the Nazis now.
Yeah, and Quark's like, hey, come run the bar with me. It's good times.
Yeah, like if I would imagine, and this is just totally like a what if, but if Quark was in a situation where he would lose his whole, life, like the bar or anything, like would he do the same thing? Yeah, that's where I think the difference is. I feel like he still has that sort of like safety net almost, whereas I don't think Rick can stay in Casablanca.
Yeah, I think that he kind of floats the idea of leaving the bar to Rom and running off with her, but you have to wonder how committed he would really be to that. Yeah. I think that for him, making profit, getting money, running biz is his truest self.
Even then too, he doesn't have to go like fight a war,
Yeah, right. It's the stakes are a lot lower for him. Yeah. I do like that, Rick's catchphrase is that he sticks his neck out for nobody, and they really should have, just like the ears looking at you, he should have, I stick my ears out for nobody. That they could have put that in there.
Yeah, he should have said that. He should have said ears looking at you. Like, that would have been fine, probably.
You could get away with that. Come on, yeah.
I do like Rick has so many catchphrases. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, just one of the things that I love and everybody loves about Casablanca is that like that script is so poppin', like it never slows down. It reminds me, for a modern viewer, it reminds me, it's not a perfect 1-to-1, but of watching like 30 Rock. Like 30 Rock, their joke ratio is like the number's so low, like every 5 seconds they're giving you something to react to, some joke and something to laugh at. And like Casablanca is every other line is just like goes up on the AFI list. Yeah, it's just a classic.
Yeah, and that's something that's interesting because I don't think this is totally unique of that time, but I feel like so many movies like pre 1975 get like from more of a average perspective are like, oh, that's like an old movie, like it's probably slow and boring, which is not true of a lot of movies that are from that time. But this is like the perfect example of like, I just watch this movie, like just watch it and tell me this is boring. It's never, it's always fun or interesting or something,
Yeah, it was the French New Wave that ruined everything, because now you can have like two people driving around in a car for 15 minutes and nobody says anything.
Yeah.
And there's a picture of a cat or something. But no, back then it's like all the dialogue had to be going all the time.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't know. It's unfair. And I don't even agree that the boring movies are boring, but that's another story.
Yeah. Well, Quark is, as we said, a little bit different than Rick. Unlike feeling resentment over their separation, his separation from his love, he runs right out to meet her like the second that he sees her. Like that's the sort of difference is that he's 100% ready to renew this connection. And of course the complication will be the fact that she's, committed to her work and to her students, like in the film. But yeah, he's just going he doesn't have to be convinced to like be with her again. He's ready to do it.
Right. Well, because I'm guessing from his perspective, it's like he's probably ended a lot of relationships or friendships by just being himself and being slimy, So like,
yeah,
he's probably like, yeah, I understand that. Like, but I hope this person will come back to me anyway.
Yeah, take me for me, baby. I gotta hustle.
It actually makes and it makes her a little bit, I don't want to say more interesting than a movie, but it's just like she has a different role where she's actually part of the revolutionary or whatever. Like she's kind of maybe not the leader or whatever, but she has more of a stake in it. Whereas like at the end of Casablanca, the big speech is like, you've got to go and like support this guy.
Yeah.
He loves you. You know, she's more of kind of a role. Like, yeah, it's a more like what you kind of expect from a female character from the time. It's still great, but it's just
it's interesting because I had a big, not argument, but a big monologue that I gave to my girlfriend the other day when we were watching this film. And it's the idea that up until like the fifth act, and Casablanca has a 5-act structure and it makes sense because it's based on a play. But up until the fifth act, I think that she, as much as she can be for a movie from the late 30s, early 40s, is a pillar of the action that's going on. She is a part of that triangle. Her choices are as important as anybody else's. It's just in the fifth act, to give it a Hollywood ending, where Rick is going to do something noble and he's going to make a selfless choice and put her on that plane. Her concerns are left out. I think both Casablanca and Prophet and Loss let their female leads down in that respect. And I think the problem is it's the ambiguity of their feelings. It's an important aspect of the character of Ilsa. And I think by extension, Natima, that her power in the story is who she's giving her affections to. Which is understandable for a 1940s Casablanca. It's a little more regressive. It's a little regressive for a 90s TV show. But what she really thinks about the protagonist, or her actual husband, if she has one in the story, is hard to quantify. And I think it's because she's both torn between two worlds or two men, but also because she's intentionally obfuscating her real feelings to achieve her goal, specifically to get to safety. There's a series of scenes at Casablanca where she has to kind of feel out Rick. And it's pretty clear, like early on, that she first, in the first act, she sees him and it's like, oh, it's nostalgic. Remember those good times. And he's a total dick to her. And after that, she's like, all right, forget this guy. But later on, when she learns about, the papers and the utility he has, then it becomes like, okay, I need to talk to you. She goes to see him, at night in the bar, and she, at first tries to cajole him and then pleads with him, then eventually just pulls a gun on him. And the end of that sequence is her being like, oh, I've always loved you. I don't know what to think. You think for both of us. And I can't, with my modern eyes, I can't help but read that as it's an act. I mean, I think she does have feelings for him. They had this like amazing whirlwind romance, but she's going to do whatever she has to save her husband, who she loves. Yeah. And I think that, unfortunately, I don't think that Natima is characterized that deeply. And honestly, I'm not sure that Mary Crosby is necessarily up to the acting challenge, but we get those beats in the DS9 episode as well, but they're not fleshed out enough to really get what Natima's thinking. We know that this cause is super important to her. And we know that she cares about Quark too, but like she does shoot him. And
I was about to say she does pull the trigger.
Yeah, she pulls the trigger. No, it's non-lethal, but like, yeah, she pulls the trigger, and then immediately after is like, oh, I feel bad. Oh, yes, Quark, I remember all those great times.
Well,
but I feel like it's a similar thing where she doesn't really, does she mean it or not? And because the episode has to end with two characters we like walking away with a beautiful friendship, we don't ever really explore it.
Yeah.
Because the story just goes, well, I guess that's not that important. And it's like, no, I want to know if Elsa really loved him or not. I want to know if Natira really ever thought about abandoning her cause.
She does say when she's leaving, right, in Casablanca, like, that's not true. Like, I did feel those things for you, right? Like,
yeah.
She's like, yeah.
And they also talk about, they talk about how, they will always have Paris. But we had lost that until last night. When you told me the truth about Victor and we talked about all that stuff and we have that back now, but it puts all of those words in Bogey's mouth because it could have been a conversation between two equals, but instead he has to have this big long speech that everybody remembers, even though there's much better lines in Casablanca. And I think that it's too bad. And I also think that a modern reading of it would also. I've thought about this a lot. A modern reading of it would also be honest about how this whole problem was caused by Rick. Like, he was hurt by a woman, and so now he's acting like a prick and being a miserable guy running this bar.
Yeah.
And if he had just given them the papers right away, this would be over. And it takes the entire action of the movie for him to finally get over himself and see himself as a hero. And then once he does see himself as a hero, he has to go, I'm going to give the heroic speech. Let me tell you about this hill of beans in this crazy world. And she's like, I was a war widow who found out that my husband was actually still alive. And we've been running all over Europe trying to escape the Nazis. And you're going to tell me about like the hill of beans. Like, he's just totally mansplaining all of World War II to her.
Well, I liked, in the scene where where the gun is pulled in both of them, especially in Casablanca, what I like about it is I feel like they both, especially Rick, obviously, he's this whole time being this prick, and it's like, why won't you help them? Like, even if you have this, it's obviously the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And you've shown, that it's not really that big of a problem for you to help people like that.
Yeah,
but, and then.
Because he helps the young Czechoslovakian couple.
And yes, exactly. And then she's also got, like, also, if she could maybe have told him like what happened, like maybe that would make things a little bit easier. Yeah. But I feel like that scene where they confront each other, like, and it goes to those extremes. What I like about it is it takes like this very extreme moment, this like totally extreme moment for them to kind of then like erode away their like the thing holding them back, and then they finally open up to each other, but it's like, it's much too late, obviously, but that's what I like about it, is that it's kind of this explosion where they can and then they can finally, like, in the rubble of that, sort of put things back together. So I do like that. I do like that.
And they are eating their own hearts out. They're in conflict with themselves. He's completely unable to just get over this betrayal, and also, just feeling like the war is a losing effort and having lost so many times. And she feels guilty and conflicted because she, thought that her husband was dead, and she fell in love with this man. And then she learned that her husband was alive, and she had to leave this guy, and she never felt like she could tell him. And so she sees like what a wreck he's become, and she probably feels like responsible in some way for it. And so how does she make that right? She can't, because they've got to get these stupid papers, and they've got to get out of here because they're going to get killed by the Nazis, And so everybody is just tearing themselves apart inside. And you don't have, Quark just never touched by that. He doesn't really care. He just wants to date this lady again.
Yeah. He doesn't really ever have to make that choice. You've got, cause you've got Garak kind of being the Rick in the end part. I don't know. It's weird to try to one-to-one assign the stuff, obviously.
That's true. I think if we had to one-to-one, like, Garak would be the Louis in this case. He'd be the Renault, Captain Renault.
Okay.
And although Garak doesn't have any authority in the Cardassian order the way that Renault does in the Vichy France government. He's still, as the guy that contacts Cardassia, he's still, sort of the representative of the Cardassian interests. And both Louis and Garak are pragmatists. Neither of them are explicitly allied with the people who are after the refugees, but they both see the value in playing along. And there's that cool scene at the beginning, which is this is only the third time we've seen Garak, where he's having lunch with Bashir, and they're talking about some other work of fiction or something that happened, where Garak comes down, on the side of the state. He's like, this guy betrayed his brother, but that's what you do because it's Cardassia and the state is the most important. We see where he is at the beginning and, of course, where he changes at the end, much like Louis does in Casablanca.
Yeah, both those roles in that end specific part, I think they're just very exciting to me.
Yeah.
With Garak, it's because he gets to totally ice a guy, and it's so cool.
Yeah,
he just vaporizes a dude. It's like one of those ones where it's like, I like when they can make a phaser feel like violent,
Yeah.
Even though it is just a guy disappearing on screen. It reminds me.
He doesn't just like go sleepy time, fall down. Like he's just gone.
Yeah. It's just like the one in Khan where the guy phasers himself, where it's like, you then realize like how messed up this technology is. 'Cause it's like, yeah, we can just like literally disappear people. It's horrifying. I love that. And then I like the ending in Casablanca where it's like, it goes what you were saying about his characterization. 'Cause it's like Rick just had his gun pointed at him. But then at the end, it's like, this could be the start of a beautiful friendship.
Yeah, let's run off and fight the war together.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's interesting that they take the murder weapon out of Rick, out of Quark's hands in DS9 and give it to Garak. I think it makes sense because we're trying to establish, this episode specifically establishes that Garak is as dangerous as Bashir and as the audience thinks, but it takes the choice of the moral horizon of, stopping this guy through murder out of the hands of Quark, and puts it in Garak's hands instead. It'd be like in Casablanca if Louis shot Major Strasse instead of our hero Rick.
Right. Yeah, it makes me wonder, because I'm rewatching, I want to see where Garak goes, because
he does cap some more guys later on.
Yeah, because that's the thing he does, like, I think of like when he's got to like torture Odo, and they do they put a spin on it where he's like, I have to do this, man, and they become friends afterwards, and he's like, sorry.
Right, which is weird.
It is, but it kind of makes sense in the story. I like here where it's like, especially they establish like at least some question of like, he might have like killed all of them,
Yeah, that was the plan.
But then a guy just showed up and was like, yeah, you didn't think this would, actually help you. And he's like, oh, okay, well, now I guess I'm going to kill you. Like, he would have done this really evil thing if not for just this one thing where the guy showed up,
Yeah, and who knows, how much authority he puts into like Turan saying that this was never going to be his, ticket to get back to the Empire. But it almost like establishes that there is ambiguity in Quark and there's in Garak, and there's capriciousness in Garak as well, because he does really like insult Garak, and Garak could just still kill them and go, all right, well, still put in a good word for me, or like contact somebody else. But instead it's like, you son of a bitch. All right, you know what? You're going to die today. Screw you. Don't make fun of me. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that.
Quark and Garak are an interesting pairing that don't happen very often on the show. And all of the sort of, arguments about moral ambiguity that happen between Rick and Louis in Casablanca get boiled down into that one great scene where Quark goes to Garak's tailor shop, ostensibly to buy a dress, but of course they're not talking about fashion. They're talking about, the things that are going on in the station that they both know about, but they're doing it in these sort of coded terms. Garak talking about, how fashion is kind of capricious, and I'd hate to see your lady friend be a victim to fashion.
Yeah, that was really fun. That's some classic Garak dialogue, really.
Oh yeah.
What stuck out to me is because like I am in the middle of like season 5 watching right now, and it's funny because it's like they establish here like, oh, we haven't really like talked much, like you haven't ever come by my shop, and now like that's just a normal thing. Like you'll just see Quark in Garak's shop like every once in a while, you know.
Yeah.
Like getting a fitting or whatever. So this was really broke down some barriers for them, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, they have the start of beautiful friendship at the end of the episode.
Yeah, we actually get to see
as
the follow-through.
They walk away from a murder scene, a murder that will never be solved. I think it's funny that all the consequences that are sort of established in the episode are just kind of over when the episode ends, and that's what happens in weekly TV. But Cisco, who is not a big part of this episode, but does sort of represent the law as it goes on, he reveals that the Bajoran government wants to trade these Cardassians for some Bajoran prisoners. And so that's set up. And then Quark, much like Ilsa goes to Rick, Quark goes to Odo and basically begs him to let these people go, which Odo does. But it's like, does Odo get in trouble for that? Or does Odo have somehow the authority on the station to just go, no, we're going to let these people go? Like, he wants to do it for justice, but like, what do the institutions involved think about that choice? And then also,
we need a part two.
Nobody wants to know what happened to Turan. Turan's just gone. There's a cell phone ringing somewhere that'll never be answered.
That's what's great about Garak is like, he like will commit murder and it's like, oh shucks, buddy. I love it. I think it's great. Like, it's cool. I guess they try to have some consequences. They'll usually follow up things. You know, like in this episode, they're talking about how people are losing faith in the Cardassian military, was it, or whatever, and then it's like, later we totally see that sort of implode. So
yeah, the Cardassian resistance movement that is working in secret in earlier episodes, and then probably pretty much gets completely destroyed when the Obsidian Order and of course the Dominion roll in and take everything over.
Yeah, there will be fallout to things. We can just assume there was some red tape and paperwork that had to go on after this episode happened.
Yeah. There's, we talked about how it's okay to let characters act out of character or to introduce new facets to their character. And I think that this episode definitely does that with Garak and with Quark to a degree. Also with Odo, to show that he believes in justice. He's going to uphold the law, but his personal code of justice is more important than, slightly more important than, whoever he's working for or the general peace that he's trying to uphold. And I think that is, we see a glimpse of that in the book that he's reading, which is the Mickey Spillane book, I, the Jury, the first Mike Hammer book. And of course, Mike Hammer is a hard-boiled detective who, has his own code. And so, yes, he's, the gooey cop of all time, but he's also a guy who's like, okay, this law's kind of dumb. I'm going to let you slide on that one.
Yeah. Odo, he can be convinced.
Yeah, eventually. I mean, it's funny that it's funny that people like Odo so much when he's such a prick for so long on the show. Yeah. Like he's humanized, literally, in later seasons, but he's just the guy that comes in and goes, I'm going to break your legs if you're doing anything bad.
Yeah. They'll like mention some, like, I don't know. They'll mention something that's like fascist and it'll be like, well, that sounds like it's probably, effective and good.
Like, yeah, right. He's like, oh, I like that. Yeah.
He is like in favor of like many aspects of fascism, and he's like, yeah.
Non-lethal rounds sounds good to me. They're not lethal.
Yeah. It's a hard sell when then they try to be like, at first because when they first start to be like, and he's in love with Kira, and it's kind of sad, and it's like, oh, buddy, a little bit, but it's sort of like, man, you kind of suck. But then eventually I think they get there to where you're like, all right, I feel bad for this guy.
I suppose. Maybe
when he starts being like, what's that one episode where he's like, just so horny for going back home,
Yeah.
He's like, I gotta go home.
Yeah.
You're like,
yeah.
oh man, he can't help it. He was born weird, you know?
He was born that way. He's weird. I think the ultimate failing of the episode in comparison to something like Casablanca is that nothing can really change by the end because it's a weekly series. You know, we can show these new aspects to our characters, but we still have to go mostly back and reset to the way things were for next week. And meanwhile, you know, the 2-hour movie Casablanca is, the whole point is that everybody has their lives changed by the end. Everybody is either on a new track or has their faith in their track confirmed, you know, and reassured. And so setting up a story that needs, you know, in its structure to lead to change, but not being able to do that on DS9 because Quark's got to be, you know, a parasite next week. You got a problem.
Yeah. Though, I mean, I think they do a good job usually of honoring that stuff in Deep Space Nine, you know, like even if it's something minor, like you expect there to be more ramifications than there actually are. I feel like they still do a good job of honoring it and like being like, where can we take the character from here? Like I think of Rom, for example, as someone like that.
Where they missed a chance to have Rom be the Sam.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, you know who's got Rom vibes in the movie is the bartender.
Yeah,
he's such a little goofball, and I'm like, this is Rom for sure.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
You know who's got this might seem mean, but I feel like Peter Lorre has the Quark vibes because he's just like this weird little creepy guy.
Oh, someday we gotta sit down and like 1940s cast DS9. That's great.
Oh yeah. Well, we got 2 already.
I feel like I've seen a meme like that somewhere, you know, where it's like, it's a spaceship in the future. And then, you know, classic actors playing the different roles.
Oh, my. Yeah, that sounds like fun.
So they don't, you know, we've established here at the end of the episode that they don't completely fit together, and that's fine. But one of the most powerful moments in the episode, or in the movie, the Marseillaise moment, where the entire bar, you know, sings the French national anthem to drown out the Nazis.
Yeah.
A moment that is moving in the film, but was especially moving for the international cast of the film, many of whom were refugees from Europe themselves in the production.
Oh yeah, this is made in, like, it came out in 1942, right?
Yeah, it was made, basically the script was greenlight December 8th, 1941. And then they rushed into production, and there's a lot of... It's propaganda, you know, it's pro-ally propaganda for good reasons. But there's that line in the movie where Rick is getting drunk, and he's like, I wonder what's going on in America. It's December in 1941. I wonder what's going on in America.
Yeah.
He talks about people sleeping all over the country, and it reminds me of, I believe, FDR's words about how Pearl Harbor, you know, awakened a sleeping giant, you know, roused America to join the war. But anyway, the point is that the French were already in the war, and they were having the bad end of it. And so this moment where they sing the Marseillaise like really inspires them. What would the Marseillaise moment be in the DS9 episode?
There is one. What is it? I had that. I can't remember there.
Really? Because I'm not sure there would be one. Because I think that, you know, everybody always talks about the Federation, but I feel like patriotism is not often explored in Star Trek. You know, people aren't like, you know, hey, we're Federation and we're better than everything else. I mean, I guess that's maybe nationalism, but...
Yeah, I was thinking more from the Cardassian rebels. Like, I felt like they might have had some sort... no, maybe not.
Damar's speech to the Cardassians in season 7.
Oh, sure, yeah. Yeah, it comes much later. But
yeah.
I felt like there was something like that, at least feeling with those characters being like, you know, we can be better than this type thing. But
yeah.
Maybe there's not that in this episode.
And this is the story of the aftermath of a war, I guess.
Yeah. Well, and honestly, I mean, I get the purpose of that in the movie, and it works really well for establishing what these people care about, especially as opposed to Rick. But I don't know. I guess there's nothing in like I don't need that necessarily in this episode because I don't need to get behind. I don't know. Like we kind of know the stakes here with that.
It would help though, wouldn't it? Because we've got Natima, and then we've got her students, and we never get an idea of what they do or like. Well, I know that they're students of political ethics, which I must imagine is a science in its infancy in Cardassia.
Yeah.
But we're told they're important, and we're never really like given to understand like we're never shown how important they are.
They could have like the students of political ethics, but it's like similar to how they have a court system where it's not really real,
Okay, sure.
Or like the political ethics they teach are messed up and maybe they're trying to subvert that,
Yeah,
maybe
that's cute. It's like being a communications major. Yeah, learn nothing. Maybe I'm super naive saying this, but I guess I've never thought about it before as, is DS9 kind of like the interwar period between World War I and World War II? Where, because it's always thought of, I always hear it presented as, DS9 is post World War II, like after, an occupation and the Bajorans are Jews. But like, what if it's post World War I, the Bajorans are the French, but also the beleaguered peoples of Europe. And then the Dominion is the Nazis and Hitler and everything. And they come in
sure,
and get everything rolling again. And then that's the Dominion War is World War II. Maybe this has already been figured out, but this just occurred to me now.
I see discussions like that a lot about like, okay, who are the Bajorans? Are they this? Are they this? And it's like, you can't. Obviously, so much isn't just inspired by World War II. Like, I feel like a third of our episodes on our show is like, they took this Nazi thing and made it a thing. But obviously, you can't fully paste that all on, and there's not really Bajorans in this episode, so maybe that's why you can't have it in this one. It
would have been really easy for them to make all these Cardassian characters Bajoran characters, and I think that I'm not saying they should have. I like the fact that they're Cardassians, but it would still work. The Cardassians are after them. Garak informs on them in order to curry favor with the Cardassian High Command, but they didn't. Instead, they made it Cardassians, and I think that that's interesting. And I also think that having Quark be in love with a Bajoran woman, fine. I guess he likes Kira. We do see him with Pell in Necessary Evil, but I like the idea that there's that extra layer of interspecies romance where it's like two totally alien species who have a romantic relationship.
Yeah, two, like a lizard and a toad.
Two weirdos. Yeah, get it on.
And we're gonna make them smooch and mess up their makeup. Like, that's a fun thing to show on screen as opposed to like just a hot person with some nose ridges.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's what you can get from Trek. That's what Trek brings.
Show me two monsters.
Should be two monsters just sucking face. Well, at the end of the episode here, I thought that we would give listeners, if they haven't heard BackTrekking, a little preview of something that we do at the end of episodes of BackTrekking. Something that makes Trek is the technology of their future. Sometimes it facilitates what the characters are doing, like in this case, the papers being a cloaking device. Makes perfect sense. But just as often, it's the complication that the characters have to deal with. So on every show, we randomly pick from a list of Star Trek technologies, and we add what we get to the non-Trek media, and we subtract it from the Trek episode, and we see how each would be different. And we call this our technological exchange. And we've actually already submitted Casablanca to a technological exchange when we covered it on BackTrekking in comparison to the TNG episode, We'll Always Have Paris.
What was the technology for that time?
Oh, man, I'd have to go way back in the archives.
Hopefully we don't get the same one.
Yeah. And that was an episode that has a title that's a line from it, also features Picard, meeting an old love. But this DS9 episode is way more Casablanca than
this.
This
is like they lifted the story.
Yeah.
And that they were like, what if there was a romantic
What if we put
subplot?
ears on Rick? And then we did that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's our list of technology that we use. It's phasers, holodecks, tricorders, transporters, warp drive, replicators, communicators, shields, advanced medical technology, and androids. And if I use my random number selecting technology, I get a 5, which is warp drive. If warp
Whoa.
drive existed in the world of Casablanca, then how would it be different?
I feel like it would be a lot easier to get out of
You'd be
Casablanca.
taking a warp shuttle to Lisbon.
Rick would probably not be as useful.
Well, I think the easy answer, and we never take the easy answer, is that it's just DS9. Right, like this world war would be a space war. Casablanca would be a space station that sits at the crossroads of many nations, and it would just literally be the dream of the writers of this episode, making Casablanca exist in the Star Trek universe. But since we can never do it quite that easy, what else would we see?
I was thinking like it would just be like the characters in the movie specifically would just not be important. I feel like, but because I'm imagining a world where everything is the same, but then there is just warp drive. Like suddenly, like say the Wright brothers just invented warp drive on accident instead. So
their 18-second flight at warp. Yeah.
So people are watching black and white movies. They're still going to Rick's,
wearing fedoras, and yeah. That's interesting. It would certainly be, a military asset, and so at this point, I guess we can assume that the Allies and the Axis have equivalent technology. So there would be warp planes or warp ships that possessed by the Americans and the Allies, and the same with the Nazis. I wonder if the Nazis, because and Major Strasse makes a big point of this in Casablanca. He says, "We Germans must get used to every climate. What do you think about us being in New York? What do you think about us being here and there?" Maybe the Nazis would not only be trying to invade Europe and do that sort of thing, but they'd be trying to invade other planets, like. We're going to send some columns this way. We're going to send some columns that way, but we're going to send some columns up too.
There's probably plenty of media that's like, what if the Nazis were in space, right?
The whole Wolfenstein reboot series. Is basically that. Yeah.
That made me think that this is kind of off topic a little bit, but that conversation and some of the conversations they had, maybe I said this the last time we covered this, but like, it makes me think of, even though this is propaganda, it pro-ally propaganda, it kind of this, and like I think we did like The Enemy Below or whatever, that I think that was what it was, but like of like what you can get out of making a movie at this time, where like the way they look at the Nazis, it's like they're a big threat, but then it's like this guy our big American hero is kind of like can like pal around with them a little bit. And be like, they're kind of like relatable, these bad dudes. Whereas like, I feel like it would be impossible. It's like not until later when they tried to like reckon with the Holocaust and everything, where like you wouldn't get that as much. It would be more like, I guess you wouldn't humanize the Nazis as much,
Yeah, Indiana Jones would immediately have to start punching him in the face, like over and over and over again. Yeah,
but I think instead here we actually get kind of a realistic portrayal of like kind of maybe more an average American at the time who was like, I don't know, that's not my business,
Yeah. Be careful invading certain parts of New York. I don't think you'll do too well there. Yeah. Also, just being a guy who is committed to maintaining a peace, because. And maybe the movie undercuts this, but ostensibly he needs everybody's business. But we do see that his antipathy towards fascists comes out in him not letting the Deutsche Bank guy into the gambling room, or the guy, his maitre d' brings him a check. He's like, "Oh, these Germans paid with the check," and Rick's like, "Rip," throws the check away. Clearly he's, acting against his self-interest to express how he feels about these guys. But yeah, he does have to be the guy who's like, okay, Nazis over here, French people over here, fine. Everybody just drink your drinks. It's all right.
Yeah, which is I guess then that ties back into his speech. Like, what's going on with America? Like, yeah, maybe he represents all of the American populace who are like not interested in war or something.
Yeah, they're all asleep. And then for some reason, we never really get the reason, but for some reason he can't go back there, I guess. He's can't return to America for some reason.
He sounds cool, honestly. Like, whatever he was up to. Like, if he was, like, fighting fascists and, like, if he did that, he did something related to that somehow ticked off the American government. And so he's probably cool.
Yeah. Humphrey Bogart plays a cool character, film at 11. Also, I think maybe if warp drive exists, then the technology of warp drive would be important. So perhaps they have access to a shuttle, something that can get them away from Casablanca station. But now we need, the part, the person, the couriers are carrying like, the component that will make it work instead of just like the clearance to make it work.
Can you warp like 2,000 miles? Or is that all like, what's the like minimum distance you can go warp?
That's a good question. You just like turn it on and turn it back off again real fast.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, could you warp from, Manhattan to Paris or whatever?
Well, to do warp, you've got to go at least the speed of light, right? That's warp 1. And
yeah.
I think in First Contact, they're going warp 1 or maybe slightly over warp 1 because they fly out to around Pluto or Neptune, and it takes them, a couple hours like it would.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, like, warp 1 on a galactic scale is extremely slow.
Because I'm just thinking of, like, them... Because, there's no other place they need to go right now. So I'm just trying to think of, like, micro warping, to get to the... Because they don't have teleporter or transporters,
Right, yeah.
But they also don't have, like... In this world, I'm imagining, they also don't have, like, regular airplanes. So would there be, like, what about warp trains? Can you do that? Why don't they have that?
Those couriers are killed on the warp train. Yeah.
That would make for a great murder mystery. Murder on the Warp Train Express or whatever.
Maybe then them escaping to America across the Atlantic is not as safe as you'd think, because the arduous journey on the plane from Lisbon that takes you all the way across, or the ship that they're going to take or whatever. Now they could be followed to America, in the blink of an eye, because you just take your warp ship, get there right away.
Oh, warp ships would be cool, like a warp boat.
A warp boat. Okay, all right. You know what? I think we can stop it right with the invention of warp boat. I think we did it.
This is a cool world. I think sometimes we invent a sci-fi world that I want someone to explore. Warp punk, yeah.
So, assuming that it's not the just exact negative picture of what we just created, what does the world of DS9 look like without warp drive?
Oh, we run into this situation a lot where it's like, what
if we take away one of the pillars of the Star Trek universe?
How things are facilitated. Granted, this all takes place on one area, but it's like, would the Cardassians and the Bajorans even be in relative closeness to each other anymore?
I think it's safe to say that the Bajorans had warp technology when they were invaded. I would imagine that it wouldn't be as advanced as Cardassian stuff. But if neither of them have warp, and let's say the Cardassians have something approximate or something kind of fast, they could go, all right, we're going to launch all of our ships to the Bajoran system, which is, 4 light years away. So in, 4.5 light years, we'll unfreeze our troops and begin
really
the invasion.
Slow invasion.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You would have to think about it more in terms of, we can't just show up wherever.
You know what would happen? The Bajorans, with their superior solar sail technology, become dominant in the region. And they become the superpower.
Yeah. We did say warp drive. We didn't say the existence of warp travel. And in the episode Explorers, Jake and Sisko...
That's an accident.
Their ship, they find some kind of conduit, some kind of natural phenomenon that allows them to travel at warp. So maybe the Bajorans take over Cardassia.
The Bajoran Empire.
Yeah.
That's actually a great, if they could have another mirror universe,
Sure, yeah.
Let's see that.
The Bajorans, and they've perfected these sails at this point. So they're going like fast warp speeds with their solar sails. Eventually they find their celestial temple, and it ushers in a golden age
God.
of Bajoran society with the Cardassians as their client species. What happens when they travel through the wormhole and discover the Dominion?
Well, does the Dominion have warp too?
That's a good question. Would the Dominion as an entity be possible without warp drive?
I don't know. They seem like, well, actually, honestly, maybe, okay, this is even thinking even further, but, like, part of the reason they're so crabby is because they're like, oh, we were changelings, and, like, everyone made fun of us and bullied us or whatever. Like, maybe they don't ever meet anyone, and they can just live happily on their little goo planet. This seeming failure has turned into one of our most expansive what ifs, if you will. But let me add to it. In the episode, blah blah, what it's called, when Odo meets Las, Las has assumed an organic form that can travel at warp speeds. Remember? So maybe what?
Remember the changelings? Maybe the changelings are just doing fine because they can fly around themselves.
Oh, they can
speed.
warp.
Yeah.
The changelings, they can be out in space. They're fine.
Well, when he meets Laz, who's a foundling like him, he's just cruising around doing his thing like in space, and just kind of goes, "Hey, what's up?"
What does he turn into when he's in space? Is he just
I can't remember what he looks like, but
okay, I gotta get to that one.
Yeah. That one's
I would
that's
turn
like
into a jet.
He just turns into a space jet. Yeah. So now you've got, instead, maybe they wouldn't have I don't know if you can like turn into an entire ship that people could ride in, but like if
oh my God.
But you would have like Dominion or Founder Crack shock troops. So like, you've got a planet that's supposed to, be a part of you, and you tell them what to do, and they try to rebel. So you send like 10, warp speed changelings, and they all just land and then like turn into blades and knives. And
that
just
is so sick.
T-1000 anybody that tries to fight them.
So in this world, we've got them, and they're kind of dominant way earlier because no one else can mess with them. And then you got the Bajoran wind sail or solar sail empire.
Yes.
And they could have a big war.
Yes.
This is sweet. I want this alternate timeline.
I remember now when Laz was in his spacefaring form, he looks like an organic, like alien type ship or like,
That's
squiddy
awesome.
thing going around. So yeah, you've got Bajoran light sails versus changeling spacefaring squid people.
And they could easily be like, all right, now our wings are blades, and they're like,
yes.
Or they could turn into giant fists.
They could turn into giant fists.
And punch. And just punch the sails. Because those things look fragile.
It wouldn't be a technological exchange without ships with giant fists.
Wow.
Out.
This is the best one we've ever done.
We did it. This is the best one we've ever done. And it's not even on our show. So what a waste. But anyway.
Actually, no, it's not. Go listen to our show where we do really good ones.
Yes. Well, let's talk about My Space Dad Can Beat Up Your Space Dad. You've said that before, that Cisco is your favorite captain, and he's kind of on the fringes of the episode, and he's behaving himself for the most part. Like, unlike the Cisco we see in later seasons, he's obeying the wishes of the Bajoran provisional government. He's ready to give up the hostages, even though he doesn't want to. But he changes later. Using the Casablanca setting and the idea of World War II, is Cisco the Churchill of DS9's World War II?
I guess so. Yeah.
Yeah. He's certainly the General MacArthur, because he, leaves the station. He says, "I'll return." And he comes back and gets his baseball.
Oh, we're talking about throughout Deep Space Nine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess so. I guess he's like the guy, who you think of as like, oh, we stood right face to face with him and stood up to him, I guess.
Yeah. We'll fight them in the nebulas.
Or maybe he's the Stalin.
He's our Stalin. Yes.
They were right on the the front lines of that wormhole with all the Dominion coming out and everything.
That's true. They would be the Asia, which you don't invade Asia. Come on. Yeah. Interesting. Well, that's a whole nother show. I'll have to try to manipulate some kind of
yes,
some episode of Enterprising Individuals where we do a Risk, Star Trek Risk. I'll write that down, Star Trek Risk. Now that we reach the end of the show, you'll receive a promotion to the rank of Lieutenant Commander for your previous service. And we've talked about your duties on the ship before. I think previously you were bar backing for Guinan. Then in your capacity as a public relations person, we had you commissioned as an ambassador.
Oh, yeah.
If you were a bar back in Rick's Cafe Americain in Casablanca, do you think the tips would be good?
I think so, because I think it seems like a good place where people are, kind of like, people seem like, I don't know, you can just come here and not really have to think about what's going on, and you had they really established it as like a real kind of international vibe,
Yeah,
you've got the Moroccans, I bet the Nazis tip great.
Oh boy, I feel like that's a controversial statement, but okay.
Yeah, no, they seem like I'm just they
or maybe well, I don't know. I mean, maybe you get the the opening scene of Schindler's List, where it's just it's a bit of bacchanalia. There's a lot of marks being thrown around and stuff. I would think that, like, obviously some of the customers would be impoverished because they're trying to save money to get out of town.
Yeah, that's true.
Other customers have profited off of those people, and so maybe they're throwing the money around and it's a good time. Or maybe there's just a joie de vivre. After you have everybody sing the Marseillaise, suddenly everybody's throwing francs everywhere.
There's the gambling, I think.
Yeah, there is gambling.
But two, here's the difference is between Rick and Quark, once again, is they had to shut down, and Rick makes a point in the movie to be like, well, everyone still gets paid.
Right.
Which would not happen at Quark's. So
No.
Quark seems like fun to go to, but not to work at least until the union is established or whatever.
Right.
Whereas, like, they seem all pretty happy there. So even if I wasn't getting tipped, I bet Rick takes care of you regardless. So maybe he pays you enough that regardless of the tips, you're good.
The tips are just gravy. Yeah.
Like, yeah, Sam is just happy to be there. Someone offers him more money, but it's like, no, I'm taken care of here and I'm happy.
Yeah.
So
I love how
I'll bar back at Rick's.
They established that, but I love that Rick says, like, I don't trade in people or whatever when Ferrari's trying to buy Sam off of him, and then of course at the end of the film he's like, Sam goes with the bar. Like, you just bought Sam from me. So yeah,
just not to the right guy, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Also, the mood is very variable at Rick's, much like a Buffalo Wild Wings during a playoff game. There's like a literal shooting, and then Rick's like, "Don't worry about it," and everybody's like, "All right, great." They just go back to singing and drinking.
There's a shooting. Then you've got like Sam playing this beautiful music, but then you've got like Nazis again.
Yeah.
Like singing their national anthem or whatever they were singing, and
the bar owner is coming out and yelling at the piano player, and he stops playing the song he's playing and plays a different song.
Yeah, it's weird vibes for sure.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
I think I would get through by I think just all the coworkers there seem really great. Like, I would love hanging out with that one guy, the fatter guy with glasses, and the bartender.
Yeah.
And Sam, like, they all seem like fun.
Yeah, it's a vibe for sure.
Like, that'd be one where you close the bar down and you're like, well, there's the curfew, but where it's like, let's hang out and have a few more drinks.
We're just staying here, yeah. For sure. Or we got to go to the meeting.
The meeting, yeah.
The resistance meeting, yeah.
I would go to that for sure. Regardless of the Nazi tips.
Yeah.
The resistance.
Yeah. Well, Lieutenant Commander Fame, thanks for joining me to talk about Star Trek and the Star Trek universe. If people want to continue the conversation, and they can, at EISTPod on Twitter and the Enterprising Individuals Facebook page, where can people find you online?
Yes, I'm mostly on Twitter. I'm at Gooey Fame.
And what's coming up on virtual theater? What are you talking about in the future?
Oh, we had a hard time getting together recently because Andy got married. So congratulations to him.
Congrats to him.
So, but we're going to be recording again soon. And I think we're wrapping up the last season of that Castlevania show.
Oh, sure.
Which was a lot of fun. So I haven't finished it yet, actually, but I love it. So,
and what's coming up on BackTrekking?
BackTrekking. We recently recorded one where we talked about it compared to the Voyager episode The Thaw, which was
Stephen King's
It. I guess I should specify.
Yeah.
The 90s miniseries. And that was a lot of fun and surprising. And then upcoming, I think we're doing a Trek looking at Trek type situation where it's Lower Decks, Veritas, and the Drumhead. So that'll be we do those once in a while too, because of course Trek steals from itself.
Yes, especially a show like Lower Decks,
which is just like, remember this?
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's a commentary on Trek. Well, thanks again for joining me, and we are signing off until the next mission. Hailing frequencies closed.